Welcome friends to the part 2 of the presentation of how you can represent your data in uh, research papers, research reports and in oral presentations supported by PowerPoint. So in the first part of this presentation we have seen how to represent data in text, when and how to represent data in the form of tables, and now we will see some examples how we should report the result of an analysis. So we are not basically concentrated on analysis, but rather we want to speak in this presentation that once the analysis is done, how we are going to represent it in a research paper or report it in a research paper or in a presentation which is supported by PowerPoint. So we go to analysis and we actually see how this analysis is reported. So here we take up an example about multiple regression. So this is a simple questionnaire, and this has some questions which are related to we are trying to identify the political awareness of women, say in a village. Political awareness. So we have some basic questions on political awareness, like what is the minimum age of voting, after how many years the voting for Lok Sabha is conducted generally, your location falls under which Lok Sabha constituency, which political party is currently the ruling party in the state, and so on. So these are some basic information which we require to collect, and that so this information is about some simple political questions which every Indian citizen is supposed to know. So we will implement it in the woman of that village. We will ask a woman above the age of 18 years uh, questions like this, and we'll note down how many of them are correct. So suppose there are say 10 questions, and this individual who answered say get 8 correct out of 10, so that person's score is 8. Another person may get 7, another person may get 10 out of 10. So every individual is represented by a score which actually is directly proportional to the political awareness. More the political awareness, more will be the correct answers. So this is how we'll collect the political awareness, which is our dependent variable. Now suppose we want to see some factors which actually influence the political awareness of women. So one may be age, another may be years of formal education, as you can see here, and next is do you read newspaper every day. So let us have that these are the three questions which influence the political awareness. So three things. One is age, which is a numerical quantity. Years of formal education, this is also a numerical quantity. And do you read newspaper every day or not? So that is a dummy variable, one for representing yes and 0 representing no. Now we want to see how the political awareness score is influenced by these three variables, that is multiple regression. So in this case, if you look at this is the identification information. It has nothing to do with the analysis directly. This actually helps us to reach the respondent. Once the data is collected, after that if you need to consult the respondent at some point of time, then you take the help of this. Then we have some demographic information, which is the independent variable in our case, which we discussed just now. And then we have the dependent variable, which is in terms of the political awareness. So if 10 questions are asked, then a particular individual will get a score between 0 to 10 depending on the number of correct answers. So this is the variable of interest. We want to find out how the political awareness score can be related to this. Now let us go forward, and suppose we perform the multiple regression here. So in the multiple regression, whenever you take the help of a software and perform multiple regression, you will be provided with three tables following the analysis. So we need to put this table in the discussion. In a research report, instead of putting the table, we will put what are the outcome of the table. If you want put the table, you can put it in the appendix of the table. Sorry, appendix of the report, where results of these tables these tables are placed. But when you report it in your place it in your written report or present it in a written report, we would put this entire story in the form of a text. First have a look at this, what are the table wanting to see. First we look at the ANOVA second table, and since the value is less than 0.05, so this indicates that the ANOVA is significant. Once we find that the ANOVA is significant, that is the regression is significant, next we look at the value of R square. So R square is 0.824. You see this software, as we were discussing in part 1, many a times many a software produces these days numbers with decimals, but there is no 0 before the decimal point. Now this is not a good practice. It should have a 0. like it is 7.81, but you see it's 0.332. Instead it should be 0.332, and this is how it should be represented. Okay, once this is done, r square is quite high, 82%. This means 82% of the variation in the dependent variable is explained by the independent variable. So whatever be the value multiplied by 100, then you will get 82.4%. That means 82.4% variation in the dependent variable. That is, in this case, political awareness score is actually explained by newspaper at home, years of formal education, and age. So these are the three things. Next, we come to the equation. Last one, coefficients. This gives us the equation, and this also tells which of the variables are significant. So here we find that age at last birthday, that is a significant variable, and the newspaper at home, this is significant variable. However, years of formal education, this is not significant. That means the two, like age and newspaper at home, are significant. Years of formal education is not sorry, not significant. Anyways, so, and this actually gives us the equation. So this is the intercept 8.305, and age, this is coefficient is minus 0.33, and years of formal education minus 0.017, and 0.745 newspaper at home. So accordingly we get this equation. PAS is the political awareness score, and these are the equation. This is the partial regression coefficient associated with age. This is the partial regression coefficient associated with years of formal education. This is the partial regression coefficient associated with newspaper, and in total we get this equation. Now, how to report this result? Obviously, if we want to report the result in a PowerPoint presentation, we can report it like this. But following this, we need to write this text. However, if you are expressing the same thing in a written report, then while you are writing the report, wherever you are giving your results, there you can put the result in this fashion. But the tables can be placed in the appendix. Now that it is not mandatory to place the table in the appendix, but many a time one may want to know other details from the table. So in that case, table to be placed in the appendix. Here you see how we place the report. We tell about the dependent variable and the independent variables. Like we tell, a multiple regression was run with political awareness score as the dependent variable and several independent variables like age, years of formal education, and newspaper at home, with 3 being present as a dummy variable in the model. So newspaper at home is a dummy variable. The value of r square is 0.824, implying that the independent variables are 82.4% responsible in explaining the dependent variable, that is political awareness score. The ANOVA test provides that the regression is significant with a p-value of 0.000. That means this ANOVA tells that the regression is significant, and then ultimate regression equation is political awareness score equal to 8.305 minus 0.033 into age minus 0.017 years minus 0.745 newspaper, and star indicates that significant at 5% level. So this is how in a very few lines we can actually express the outcome or the things which are to be expressed from what we get from the tables. Next we take up another example where we actually perform a t-test. It's a two sample t-test which has a lot of computation. This is the formula of the test statistic, and this is the value of the test statistic based on this data. What we are going to do is that here we want to compare whether the amount of venom extracted from the snakes and the amount of venom extracted from the lizards are same or not. So in this case we have taken 7 snakes, and this is the value of the total venom extracted from snakes, and we have taken 8 lizards, and this is the value of venom extracted from the lizards. All of them are measured in ml, milliliter. So we have this and we have this, and then we calculate all this value, and then ultimately we get the test statistic value as this based on this data set. And then the tabulated value of t at 5% level of significance is 2.3. So it is 2.3. Since the calculated value is less than tabulated value, So the null hypothesis related to the amount of venom extracted from the snakes of lizards are not significantly different. So this is how we express it out. So calculated value of the test statistic is compared with the table value. If it is less, then we accept the null hypothesis. And the null hypothesis is that the amount of venom extracted from the snakes and lizards are all same. So this is the computation. But this is not the way in which we will report it in our PowerPoint presentation, or this is not the way in which we will report it in the written report that we are presenting. Rather, we will speak in terms of a few sentences where we try to avoid the technical terms to the extent possible. Two independent sample t-test was performed to check if the average amount of venom extracted from snakes and lizards are equal. So this is a null hypothesis. The sample size for snakes and lizards were 7 and 8 respectively. The sample mean of venom extracted from snakes were 4.06 ml and 3.71 ml respectively. The computed value of T is 0.966, which is not significant at 5% level of significance, indicating that the venom extracted from the snakes and lizards does not differ significantly. So this is what we get the outcome. Does not differ significantly. We click on back and then we come back to this. So this way we make report our analysis. That is, analysis may be in the form of many tables, lot of computations, but we don't show this computation or the table neither in the report nor in the PowerPoint presentation. Rather, we actually report it in a very concise way in few sentences so that the main theme is communicated, the result is communicated, but along with the results we put some values also, because someone might be interested to know by how much the difference is significant, or if at all it is significant or not, what are the corresponding test values. So this is the way we do it. Now we come to lastly we come to graphs, and we see how graphs are represented in PowerPoint presentation, how graphs are represented in written reports. Now graphs can be drawn in graphs are a representation of numerical information. They can be drawn in different types of software, like if you want to look at some uh, commonly used software, that is Microsoft Excel is a very commonly used spreadsheet which can be utilized for drawing graphs. Also there is something called a Scalida graph which is actually freely available online graphing portal. Okay. So this is, we have some statistical package like Statistica, SPSS, CSTAT. All of them are priced, so you have to find it out. You have to purchase it so that this thing can be used for drawing this inference. Statistical codable programs like R and SES. So R and SES are two programs which are codable. So they are actually not like directly. This R is a freely available software. These are coded statistical programs where you have to write the code. There are some commands which you need to know, with the help of which, however, you can produce from basic to very advanced graphics, both R and SES. But R is freely available, so it has become more popular, and everyone is drawing graphs in using R these days. So let us look at some very common types of graph. First is the bar diagram, which compare values across different categories. Here the x-axis represents the different categories, and y-axis represents the value of the variable where our interest lies. Then comes line diagram. This is used to plot data points with respect to time generally. Each line represents a single point treatment. So here you can see there is a basic line diagram. So two graphs used in different colors, two lines, they are representing two different entities. And along the y-axis we take time generally. So this actually helps us to make a comparison between two entities across different time periods. Generally, axis represents time and y-axis represents the dependent variable. Next we come as pie chart. The purpose of pie chart and the bar diagram are almost similar. This is used to show the contribution of each item with reference to a whole. But here what happens in basic difference between bar diagram and the pie diagram is that Pie diagram something we have a whole thing this much, and then we want to show it how what is the contribution of a different components. Very simple example is like your expenditure, monthly expenditure. Your monthly expenditure, total expenditure I have, and I want to see the breakup, how this total expenditure is reached. Like what was your expenditure on food, what your expenditure was on clothing, what was your expenditure on house rent, what was your expenditure in fuel and lighting. So all these things, what was your expenditure on education. So all these things make up for that means I have a total uh, whole thing is there, but I want to break up the whole thing and see how what is the contribution of the component parts. So in that case we use a pie chart. Next comes scatter diagram. This helps us to identify the relationship between two variables. One variable is represented along x-axis and other variable is represented along y-axis. So this is how we represent the data set. Now we come to this, we see the number of companies with number of Indian companies having R&D and this expenditure. The number of companies and sorry, number of companies in a particular year and number of companies who are having research and development wing also. So we are showing this simultaneously. We want to see that we are showing in this graph what are the technical terms within associated with a graph. Like this is a simple graph we have taken just to explain what a graph looks like. So let us see the technical term. So this first one, this is called as a y-axis title. It comes in the side of y-axis and represents the title of the y-axis. So this helps us to explain which data is represented along the y-axis. Then comes these values which pokes up, and these are called as tick marks. So not TICK by tick marks. These are called as tick marks. Then we have a bar values. So these are called as data labels. These are the data labels. Then we have the grid lines. Following the grid lines, we have something called as the graph title. As you can see the bold line that appears before the graph, ahead of the graph, that is called as the graph title. And then we have, this is called as the legend. The legend actually explains the different types of color that are being used. So number of companies and number of companies doing R&D, which is given with red bars, and those with given with blue bars, these are called as the these are the number of companies. So this color, use of color and what they represent, this is explained in the legend. Then the data source comes, which is also provided by the side of the graph, generally as a footnote. And this is called as the last one. This is called as the title of the x-axis. And ultimately, we have these values which are actually the scale figures. So we have scale figures along x-axis. We are having scale figures along y-axis as well. So these are the technical terminologies associated with a graph. You need to know this in order to, when you draw any graph, then the software will ask you actually what are the options you want to put corresponding to this technical term. So this is the demand of the software, for which you are to know the names of the different accessories associated with a graph. Now, while presenting data in PowerPoint through graphs, a question often is asked whether we should use color or not. Definitely in the graphs, color should be used, and all the accessories of the graph, whatever available, should be provided in order to look the graph more explanatory. As you can see in this graph, we have also put the legend here expressing which color representing what, and also we have put the data levels across different states so that we can compare the states for IMR, we can compare it for MMR, and we can compare it for PCI. So all these comparisons can be done, and the graph looks quite nice, and it is colored and can well uh, explained in a PowerPoint presentation. However, if you think that it should be in a written report, most of the written report are actually using monochrome, that is grayscale, printed in black and grayscale. But however, if you have option of printing in color, then you can go with colored graphs. Colored graphs makes the communication much quickly with the reader than monochrome graphs. But when you use a monochrome graph, for example, this one same graph when represented through a monochrome looks like this. Now here the problem is that some things, because here in monochrome graphs we are using different shades of gray corresponding to the colors, and some of the shades looks very close enough. For example, if it is hardly difficult to differentiate between green and blue when it comes to a monochrome graph, because the gray shades are almost very close to each other, hardly making it differentiable. However, red and blue to certain extent can be differentiated, and so is red and green, but green and blue seems to be very close to each other. The problem becomes even more serious when there are several categories that are represented by grayscale. So instead of using grayscale, there are options in Excel at least to draw the graph using different types of shades or texture. So you may use different types of texture within the bar so that these textures makes them look so different and there is no confusion. So uh, working with colors is especially can be done if the data is represented in PowerPoint, or if the printer is colored where you take the printout of your written report. However, if it is in the form of print, where actually if you send your data to many journals, what they do is that they convert your colored graph to a monochrome graph, and so in that case you will end up printing in this way, because most of the hard copy journals don't have the option of printing in color, because color printing is very costly. In order to avoid this, you can go with this type of texture, which will make a better communication when printed in monochrome. Okay, now let us look at the animation in charts. Many charts can be animated. Animated charts definitely look nice. And for example, a simple way, take up an example that we have the rainfall of different districts corresponding to different years. Now we want to represent this one by one. So what we can do is that we have x-axis, y-axis, and then we can have the first click, we have the first district 1. The second click we have the district 2, and in the third click we have the district 3. Now this type of animations can be done in PowerPoint with the help of Excel and PowerPoint coming together. Obviously, this concept of animation cannot be thought about in a printed report, because printed report is a static type of thing. Animation is not possible, but here we can animate it like this. Now how to do this type of animation in in PowerPoint when we draw a graph in Excel. So first thing is that suppose we have drawn this same graph in Excel, and then we have copied and brought this graph and pasted it here. After doing this, we click the chart, and then here we animate the chart background, and then we go to effect options. Once we click on the effect options, this type of thing comes up, this type of window. There we click on the chart animation tab, and once we click on the chart animation tab, we find that there is start animation. There are few options as one object, by series, by categories. So click on by series and click on OK. So these will give one series after another, and you will see the same type of animated graph which you have shown in the previous slide. Well, graph shall not be used. So there are some cases when you represent the data, but graph shall not be used. Yes, yet we see that some people use the graphs and make the entire thing very clumsy, which could be very easily communicated. Values are very dispersed, that is more scattered. Have too few values, have too many values makes the display clumsy. Have very little variation, nothing much to display. These are the cases when graphs shall not be used. So values are very dispersed and scattered. Let us take up the example. For example, this is the number of books published by different faculty members of a department, say, and 3 books, 5 books, like this teachers are having. One particular faculty member is having 77 books. Look at these, given that the value 77 is too high, the other values even 3 and 11 does not look to be much different from each other. So these are the cases when actually we should avoid graphing, because one value is an outlier which is quite dispersed from all others, and these will pull the attention towards itself and nullifying the attention towards others. So these can be avoided. India's medal tally in 2012 London Olympics, which comprises of 0 gold, 2 silver and 4 bronze. So 0 gold, 2 silver, 4 bronze. So this is the graph. This medal achieved by India in 2012 Olympic Games. So this is the medal tally. This is the graph that we have. So now this does not look nice. Only three values represented by graphs, and that too when one value is zero, and too few values are there, and the magnitude of the values are so less that it is better to communicate through a line instead of making a graph out of it. Now look at this, when we have too many values. Here we have different players and we want to plot the players based on their strike rate and economy rate. Betting strike rate and economy rate, we want to plot them. So we have plotted them, and thus points are not enough. We want to see which player stands in which segment or which quadrant. So we have the name of the players also corresponding to the dot. So this has been placed, and actually these here we have the bills. Now what happens if we look at this, then this does not look to be a very good graph. It looks quite clumsy and lacks to make any communication with the reader. So we should not use, instead we can place them in a tabular form like this. As you can see, this table makes it clear who are the performer, who are the betting all-rounders, who are the bowling all-rounders, who are underperformers. But if you want to look at it from this point of this scatter diagram with verbal descriptors against the dots, then it becomes very difficult. Now some important matter related to charting. First is that we need to adjust the axis when we draw the graph. Sometimes this makes a better communication. For example, these are some data sets, and we have placed these values corresponding to, that is, these values. We have drawn a scatter diagram. Now in this scatter diagram, this place remains empty. This place remains empty because the minimum value corresponding to X, this is represented X, total sale is represented in X, and total R&D expenditure is represented in Y axis. So here what happens, the axis starts at the minimum value is 5 lakh, more than 5 lakh. This is the minimum value, 5 lakh 29,000. So the minimum value is 5 lakh. So till from 0 to 5 lakh actually there are no values, and hence this part is empty. So this can be adjusted if the graph is drawn in Excel. So we can adjust it by actually taking away these values. So we click in the x-axis and double click, then we get this format axis option. We click on the format axis, and then there is the minimum value where we want to fix the minimum value. This is automatically, it starts from 0, but we can click on fixed and write the value that 5 lakhs, and then if you close it, then we get this type of graph. Here you see this extra space is now consumed, and the graphs looks more meaningful. So similarly, we can adjust the y-axis also, that instead of starting, because the minimum value is more than 1000, so instead of starting from 0, we can start from 900, so that we can get 1000 and all the values. This will make decrease the size of the graph as well and make it more meaningful. And now you see sometimes what happens, we adjust the axis, helps comparison. Here you see number of papers in journals by different authors. These are some numbers. Yes, it starts from 0, but you see none of the teachers are having less than 10. All are having more than 10. So instead of starting from 0, we can start from 10, and then the values become very much comparable. Not so much as here. So this is we adjust the axis for that. Now you see 3D charting is often practiced, especially in PowerPoint presentations, because it looks more nice than an ordinary pie diagram. But here one problem you see, this is the expenditure in percentage across different sectors. Total percentage is 100, and we have drawn a graph out of it. Now this sector 5, there is no contribution expenditure from sector 5. So actually sector 5 is 0. But here you see there is a area specified to sector 5 also in the graph. This happens because here the area of the graph is proportional to the percentage, but here area means this top part. This bottom part is of no use and should not be considered. Now you see this, when you look at this graph, this is some extra area which has come up, which has nothing to do with the magnitude of this. And this is actually the side part of this. 0 means the area at the top is 0. By the side this, but it appears here, giving a feeling that it might not be 0, might be having some value. So that is what happens when we perform 3D charting. Now this is the same graph which we had earlier, the publications by different teachers. Now we can sort the data and draw the graph. Here you see faculty 1, faculty 2, this is in serial order, but here the serial order is disturbed. They are arranged in terms of the minimum to the maximum, that is 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So this way they are arranged. So this is the number of papers in journals. It's bar or pie diagram. Now you see we generally use pie diagram, and bar diagram can be used for the same purpose also. Pie has an advantage that if you want to show how want to you have a total and want to show the component parts, then you can use a pie diagram. But if you are not interested in the component parts, things are not additive that way. Like a number of say number of students in different institutes, you want to put a graph. This is a good one to do, because here you don't need to see the total and how it is divided into the components, because the institutes are all different. So some cases obviously bar will be better, but this is an excellent example. You see these values are not same, but they are close to each other, and when you draw the graph, it is difficult to make a comparison who is more, who is less. It appears that orange is little more than the others, but the others, it seems that 1, 2, 3, these three values, and probably the fourth one, they are same. It appears that orange is little more, and blue is smaller. This blue is smaller than orange part, but that is what is that? I think sector 2. Sector 2 is sector 1 is maximum, sector 2 is second, and sector 3, sector 4, sector 5, sector 6, they are almost same. It appears from the graph. But when you draw a bar diagram of the same graph, you see what is what. Sector 3 is having minimum, and then sector 6, sector 5, sector 4, and all of them are not same. They are not at all same. They are all so different from each other. But this information is not properly communicated through a pie diagram. So when the components that you want to compare are having similar values or close values, then we can have a graph which is in the form of a bar diagram. Now, when you actually try to draw something in represent in your data through graphs, always try to have something new. There are a lot of not necessarily new, but lesser used graphs should also be promoted, because different softwares have options of drawing so many types of graphs. Now you can actually stun your audience or surprise your audience by using some new type of graph. For example, these are different organizations under government. These are under private. These are under semi-government organizations, and these are some deviation score for deviation from something. So this is represent. Now we have this dotted line. This is the average. This is the average. So this you understand that the average of private is higher than that of government and semi-government. So we make, and also we can see the raw data. So raw data averages can be compared. You also understand raw data gives us an idea about the variation. You understand that here variation is more. It starts early, ends up late. So variation is maximum here. Average is also maximum here. So this is a way in which you can communicate the average and the spread of two or more than two data sets. And we also can display the central values like this. This also can be done with the help of box plot, but then this is jittered plot. It is a little bit lesser known, but maybe in some software, at least you can. I have drawn it in R just by making a writing a few commands to draw this graph. So this is this sometimes you may try to represent this type of interesting graphs. So we go forward, and these are the references that we used for this presentation, which were consulted, and accordingly the presentation is developed. And also thanks a lot for attending this lecture. Thank you.